So this video is going to be this video is going to be a multiple topics, right? This is going to be a multiple topics video for this Sunday. This is mostly I'm going to talk about accounting techniques and things to look for while hiring an accountant. Um, and so there's a few things that a small business owner would want to look at as far as a small business owner. If you're making less than $10 million, I consider you a small business owner. If you're making less than $10 million, right? Um, from what I've seen, even if you make less than $10 million, they, companies that make less than $10 million, they're probably sitting at around 45 to $50,000 in cash in the bank at all times, right? Maybe even less than that. Because I worked for a company. Um, well, I had a client that was making around 30 million in revenue, and they had around 100,000 in the bank at all times. I mean, that's even after they're paying their bills, right? So even after they're paying their bills, they were at around 100,000 at all times, right? And they had around maybe like 10 employees or something like that. And if you're making if you're making 5 to 10 million in revenue, you're going to have around, let's say, like maybe 35 to 50,000 in cash in the bank at all times. I mean, a good business owner is going to have around 35 to 50K in cash in their bank at all times, right? And the one thing that I would probably say your biggest um, um, accounting KPI, which is a KPI is a key performance indicator, is probably cash flow. So cash flow is probably their biggest hit or miss, and being able to manage your cash flow and being able to extend your bills. So for example, if you get an electric bill that's due on October 30th, right? You kind of want to not some business owners might want to immediately pay it. So they might get a bill, right, that's due October 30th. They may get that bill on you may get that bill on October 1st, right? And it's due on October 30th, right? They may want to get those bills and immediately pay it, right? Because that's something that you probably want to. That's something that a human being is normally going to do that. A human being is normally going to do that because that's what you do in your personal life, right? You get a bill, and if you have the cash, you pay it, right? Um, in a business setting, there's other things you have to worry about paying. You have to worry about paying your main vendors, right? You have to worry about paying, um, if you're leasing a building out, you may want to pay like your lease or slash rent. Like there's other bills um, that are arranged in an order where a particular bill may not necessarily be as important at that particular moment. So when you get a bill on October 1st and the due date is 30 days, right? You may want to wait into that 30th day to pay that, right? That's just to kind of maximize cash flow. So cash flow is probably the most important metric for a small business owner, because I've seen a lot of good business owners, especially if you're working in a blue collar field, or um, where you might get, let's say if you're an electrician, or you're working with a big contractor, right? Um, you may not you have to really you really have to really manage your cash flow through a project, right? That's kind of like where I've seen it at, and I've seen a lot of small business owners just they may not necessarily have as much money as they may think, right? They're spending excessive money, especially like they're spending excessive cash, right? That's the number one metric, right? It's controlling your cash flow, right? Controlling what goes in the bank and what goes out of the bank, more so what goes out of the bank for a small business owner, right? And I would say that if you want to hire an accountant, if you want to really be cost effective, as far as hiring an accountant, you may want to look for, um, most small business owners. If you're making 10 million or less, you probably want to be on a cash basis, right? And unless you have some sort of regulation, right? There's industries where you have to send financials to a regulation, right? Let's just say if you are a mortgage broker, right? Um, you have to send financials to a regulator that works in the State Department, and they want to look at their financial statements on on accrual basis, right? Uh, but you, which you can do that once a year, right? That's not very difficult to do. But if you are uh, a for profit entity, or if you're working for a profit and you don't have to report to any regulators, you want to be on a cash basis, right? It's just easier to manage. It's better for cost savings, right? You want to be on a cash flow basis because what you're looking at is your number one prime indicator of a successful business is essentially cash flow, right? Either if it's projected in the future or it's immediate, right? That's the number one biggest indicator of a successful small business is cash flow, right? And then all the other key performance indicators kind of directly tie to that in some shape or form, right? Um, so that's kind of what you want to look for when you are looking for when you want to look at, um, if you want to look at like a key performance indicator, right? It's cash flow. That's easy as enough. Easy, all the fancy terms and all the I'm not going to get into that, but there's a lot of little fancy terms that an accountant may say to you, right? They may say, okay, you may need to do this, and you need gross margin and all this other stuff. You may not necessarily need that, right? Because most, from my experience, most most people aren't dumb. They're not dumb. I mean, they need to be able to, rule of thumb. You need to be able to have some cash to, let's just say if you own a lawn company, if you own a lawn mowing company, right? If you own a lawn mowing company, right? Um, okay, let's say you still need cash um to buy small tools, right? Trash bags to put the leaves in. Um, you may need to buy like garbage cans to put the leaves in the trash bags to put the leaves in the garbage cans, right? Just small tools. So most business owners already know that you need to have some cash, in the bank to operate on a day to day business on a day to day, and most business owners already know that, okay, you need to make money, right? You need to charge a customer a dollar amount. They don't know, but all they know is I need to charge a customer X amount of money to do that service, and then we have that amount of money left over, after spending X amount of time there, right? So most business owners already know that. I would say, um, I would say to really get a better control over that, um, a good accountant is helpful as far as being able to control that and really teaching, um, either if you're a small business owner or even an entrepreneur, really teaching them how to put a better control over their cash flow so they can grow their business down the road, right? You know, I mean, one thing about accounting, you can't do accounting if you don't have no money, right? So if you don't have no money, there's no point of an accountant if you don't have any money. This is no point, right? So all the fancy management tools and all the fancy um all the fancy management tools and the techniques and stuff like that an accountant may apply, a lot of that stuff is just is irrelevant, right? If you don't have any money, right? So the first thing that I would say for small business owners that are making less than 10 million in revenue, I would say that you your biggest key performance indicator is cash flow and how to manage the cash flow and how to control the expenses, right? Um, and being able to manage that. Um, so what can I else can I say? Well, I was thinking about something else. So another important thing that a lot of small business owners are having a hard time doing is keeping up with their day-to-day accounting. Right? Keeping up with that is good. I would say a good accountant, um, a good accountant. The whole point. So you don't want to waste people's time. A good accountant is pretty much going to be able to put your financials together, right? If you have a banking account or something like that, right? So you really want to be able to control your cash flow as far as the money coming in and the money coming out and keeping track of that throughout the year, right? I think that's easier said than done. But the successful business owners and successful executives or whatever, they are good at doing that. They are very good at doing that. Um, I worked with this one guy. He owned, dude was a straight serious entrepreneur. He owned multiple companies. I mean, this dude was making well over 30 million, 40 million in revenue. This guy had extensive cash in the bank at all times. I mean, the guy had a lot of control over, you know, over the business. I mean, the cash flow. He had control over um, the cash flow. He had control over when the taxes were due. He had control over who he hired. He had complete control over that, and he was really able to successfully run his businesses accordingly. Um, so that's the one thing I have to say about that. You know, um, so all the fancy terms that a lot of accountants may throw at you, you know, you know, a lot of this is not necessary. As far as throughout the year, right? As far as the managerial accounting, I think that's the biggest. As far as the accounting that's going to involve partaking in the management and being able to grow that business over time. So that that's an important function that a lot of accountants can do if they're good at that, right? I mean, so that's what I'm trying to say. And then, yeah, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, how in the world, um, a lot of business owners, a lot of small business owners, and I'm talking about personal too. Even in your personal life. So let's say you're a person. So a small business owner and a person is the same to me. So when I say a small business owner, you're pretty much a person at that point, right? Because most people they may run their business by themselves, right? So when I say small business owner, I'm talking about a person. So even in your personal life, you want to manage cash flow. And I think Richard Edison talks about um, cash heavy, right? Stacking cash, being able to make a profit where you can stack cash over a long period of time. So why is that important? So that's important because you may have an emergency bill, right? So you may have an emergency bill. Um, you may have a medical bill, right? You may have to get repairs for your car, right? You want to live in a way where you always have access to cash, even in your personal life, right? Even if it's short-term borrowings, stuff like that. And being able to control your expenses, even in a personal life, even in your personal space, right, is very effective. So individuals who can't do that, they're really not going to be fit for. Um, it's going to be hard to really get in leadership roles or take an effective part of ownership in a business if you can't control your expenses, right? Because you're gonna always have the mentality where you're pretty much living, um, you're living on the threads of your customer paying you, right? And that's a sign of a dying business. People don't understand that. So I was actually reading. There's this. So I'm really big into this called like turnaround, like so turnaround tools and techniques and stuff like that. As far as um turnaround businesses, like most of that has to do with more medium to large businesses with multiple people, but that's mostly have to do with um like viewing the signs of a dying business, right? Understanding the signs of a dying business or even a person, right? Because businesses kind of go through ups and downs and stuff like that, you know. Like there's only a few companies, even at the Fortune 500 level, Fortune 10. There's only a few companies that have millions of dollars in cash on in their banking accounts at one time. Apple is one of them, right? Walmart. But you'd be surprised. A lot of companies, big companies, they're living on threads. I'm not gonna really name what company those are, but a lot of companies are living on threads, and that's because a lot of people in America are living on threads, right? They're living kind of on it. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They are. If they lose their job, they're gonna go homeless, essentially, right? Um, or if someone dies in the family, or if a main person who's making the money is dies in a work accident, I mean they're going to go homeless, right? The family's going to go homeless if a main individual who's making money for that household dies in an accident. They're going to go homeless, right? That's just how the average American is living. I think that's because of how they use their money and kind of what corporate America or America's society tells you what you got to do, right? And I'm not going to say that I didn't fall for it either, but you got to understand that in America, everybody have an interest. So someone's not going to really tell you anything if they don't have an interest in it, right? They're not going to tell you. I mean, that's just not how people don't function that way. So if someone tells you something, it's because they have an interest in it, right? Every decision should be mutually beneficial. For example, student loans, right? The banks wouldn't offer student loans if it wasn't in their interest to do so, right? I'm not going to get into that, but a bank is not going to offer you student loans if it's not in their interest. You got to understand that. So at the end of the day, they still got a big ass. I mean, the only loan you can't go bankrupt on is a student loan. You can't go bankrupt on student loans. It's not possible. So you got to understand, nowhere in business is it like that. Nowhere in business. I mean, there's a there's a it's called. I mean, I'm really big into turnaround techniques. So how to turn around a business, right? You know, when a business takes out a loan to operate their business, right? So a business owner or even executives, I mean, there's board of directors that take out bank loans, right? There's board of directors that take out bank loans, right, from a bank to operate their business, and to operate their business, right? And for some reason, even it's because of competitive pressure or lack of management. Um, they're having issues paying that loan back, so they have to default on that loan, right? Before a bank allows you to default on that loan, they already assigned you assets that are attached to that loan. So let's say if you go out and you default on a loan, they have assets attached to that loan, land, real estate. They're gonna go after the personal, like the key executives. The bank is gonna go after everybody, right? So essentially, what they're gonna do is, I mean, they're gonna give you a period of time to turn that around. But what I'm trying to say is, when they go through a default, if you have to go and file a bankruptcy court, they have they have you have to pay back creditors in an order, in a particular order, right? And, credit card, unsecured loans, secured loans, stuff like that, right? So the only loan you can't pay back, or the only loan you can't default on, is a student loan, right? So when you're a business owner and you go out and you try to get a loan from a bank, and they have underwriters, they look at financial statements, they look at projections, they want history, they want this, that, and third. But if you take out a student loan to go to school, they're not looking at that. They're not really looking at what major you're in. They're not really looking at the economy at that particular time. They're not really looking at it. They're just giving you money to go to school, and hopefully that money is going to give you. The whole idea is that we may not get the money now, we may get it in the future. They're pretty much taking loans out on potential, and you can't. And their fallback on that was that we can't default on a student loan, right? Because they gave that loan out for potential. They're not looking at colleges. They're not looking at none of that. They're not looking at any of that. They're giving out student loans on potential. So, I mean, and a bank has interest in that. They're going to get their money back plus interest over a 30-year period, or how much. And that's just the reality. You know, when there's a lot, it's a lot more than that. I know. I mean, I'm in a particular situation because I'm in a particular situation. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm not even going to bring that up. But I'm Michael, and certain things only work for Michael. But I know individuals that, paid 10 grand to go to trucking school, and they're making almost $100,000 in 10 years, 5 years. They're making $100,000, and only paid 10K to go to trucking school. Or they go, like, even at the Gray Bar, the company that I'm at, the guy that got hired, I mean, he's a good guy, hardworking guy. The dude has enough sense to do the fucking job. I mean, he didn't have to spend that much money on going to college education. Right? They have enough sense to do that job. Like, you gotta understand, the whole point of an education is to get your foot in the door. I mean, that's just it. Everything else falls on you. Especially if you don't really have a highly skilled position, a highly skilled, trade, accounting. If you're not really an accountant, an engineer, a doctor, or even a lawyer, I mean, there's a lot of lawyers out here, you know, um, or electrician or something like that, it's very hard to make a lot of money on that unless you're a serious entrepreneur. Um, that's the only. I mean, if you're an average person, So I mean, that's just what that is. So I just don't know. So we live in America where if someone tells you something, it's because they have an interest in that. No one's not going to tell you something that they don't have an interest in it. They're just not going to say shit to you. That's just the reality. I think that is in business or in general. People just don't talk to you for no reason. It doesn't work like that. I mean, they do. There's not a lot of places people are like that. In Texas they're like that. You know, small. In Texas, but a lot of places in the country they're not. Just people generally aren't like that. Especially people who are offering services or something like that. We just seem to forget when we talk to those type of individuals, right? So, I mean, that's just the reality. I think everybody is for sure struggling. Every business right now is struggling. I mean, there's very few businesses that I know that are successful, but the people that from my experience, but the accountants that I know that are running successful firms at the solo level or the small business level. I mean, these guys they could have been successful at anything they do. They could have been engineers and been successful. They could have been working in the oil industry or working in the healthcare. They would have been successful at anything they would have been successful at anything. Those are the type of people that I know that are successful. Um, they just happen to be accountants at that particular time, right? At this time. So those are the individuals that I've seen. Um, but just to wrap it up, um, I mean, believe it or not, that's just kind of like the reality. I think the reality everybody is struggling. And being able to manage cash flow in your personal or your business. Being able to manage cash flow in your personal or in your business life, that's going to help. It's going to help you get ahead as far as long term. So, I mean, that's the only thing that I can say. That's just what I noticed. What I've experienced is that, from what I experienced, you got people with a middle class mentality where they're living paycheck to paycheck. You're going to live paycheck to paycheck with the middle class mentality. I mean, I hate to say it. But it's the truth. You may get $100,000. You may get paid $100,000 living this fancy lifestyle, but once you lose that job, I mean, it's a wrap. You're with everybody else. So I mean, that's just the reality. So, and I will honestly say, um, you know, outside of that, all the other metrics are just a waste of time. As far as even if you get at the mid-sized business level, man, they're mainly looking at cash flow. How can we how can we build our cash flow? Um, how can we do that over a 30-year period of time? Right? That's just how it is. And at the accounting level, and I would say hire accountants that understand that. And if they don't understand that, you shouldn't hire them. Because obviously everything is done at a cost, right? Um, that's just the reality. So, and yeah, that's about it. That's just what I wanted to go over. And one thing that I wanted to go over was they have at Chase Bank. This is separate, right? This is more of a corporate level. A corporate level. Chase Bank, they went over something called a fortified balance sheet. That's what they call it. I've got the CEO. The CEO of that company. The CEO of that company. You know, that dude is. He's a good executive. I mean, he's just a fucking good executive. But one thing he went over was about a fortified balance sheet. So what is a fortified balance sheet? And that's Chase Bank. That's just being cash heavy. So a fortified balance sheet is just a fortified balance sheet. That pretty much means that you have a shit ton of cash and you don't really have a lot of liabilities. A shit ton of cash, so when something happens, or let's just say if the industry goes default and individuals start defaulting on all these loans and stuff that Chase Bank is putting out, they have cash in the bank that can support them through those periods of drought, right? That's kind of like, believe it or not, that's the make or break of individuals. It's not really during the times of where they're successful. The times of when they're successful is kind of like, it's usually what makes or break an individual is times of drought. Like, I think like one thing that I think John D. Rockefeller, that guy was very good at betting against the market. He was just good at it, right? When times are shit, that's when you want to invest the most, because it's going to turn around, right? So when times are bad, when it's blood in the streets, that's when you invest the most, right? That's when you want to spend the most money, and when it's blood in the streets, because over time that's going to change around. It's just like that's just how the market is. It's ups and downs. That's what people make it or break it at. It's during times of droughts. Obviously, if you're working in certain industries, healthcare, if you're working in healthcare, right, education, those are pretty much, those are industries where you are generally those are recession-proof industries. Healthcare, education, recession-proof, right? But the reality is, there's ups and downs, and the good business and the good, a middle class mentality is that they're not really worried about ups and downs. A middle class mentality is that they're in their head, they're thinking about consistency, safe stability over a long periods of time, right? But you're going to get that over a long period of time, but you're going to be living paycheck to paycheck, right? And that's just the reality. And a lot of individuals don't know that, so that's why you have to be cash heavy. And this is reality. And I think, from my understanding, you got to be able to troubleshoot. But that's what the Chase executive, Chase Bank, the executive at Chase Bank. I hate Chase Bank. I had a Chase account for about 3 years. Chase. I don't like Chase, man. Customer service is terrible, right? You can't walk in at Chase Bank and get a debit card. It's just dumb. They have to mail it to you from a corporate center. So I'm like, man, I need to go to the bank. I lost my debit card. I got to go to a bank to get a replacement for my debit card, right? I can't get that. So, I had to you have to wait 4 days in the mail to get the goddamn debit card, which is dumb, right? But I don't know. But that's what Chase, the executive, I forgot his name, but they have a strategy where they implement a fortified balance sheet. Essentially, cash heavy, right? And 9 times out of 10, that guy is smart enough to use that. That guy in his personal life, he has a fortified balance sheet in his personal life too. Man, that guy's banking a whole lot of money. So in his personal life, shit, that's just a lot of it. I mean, that's what anybody would do. Like, right? Like, you just apply that to business. You want to have a cash heavy personal, right? And if you're looking at 30-year term, long term goals, I mean, you want to be able to have enough money to carry you through droughts and stuff like that. That's more natural. That is way more natural to me because if you look at human existence, just in general, we always had periods of droughts and in periods of non-droughts. So you're going to have famine, disease, stuff like that. And then you're going to have periods of when you're, periods of greatness, when you have abundance of food and abundance of material and abundance of stuff. That's a human thing, which is I don't know why Americans. That's one thing that I learned about Americans, that we seem to forget that life goes through periods and cycles. And I mean, I forget it shit all the time, but that's just the reality. And that's a thing of a human existence. Human civilization is the same way. That's why I personally think, to this day, I mean, I'm working for an employee-owned business. I'm working for an employee-owned business. And why I personally think that the whole employee and employer relationship is just not a natural thing. Corporate America isn't natural in a sense that if you threw a bunch of 100 human beings, on a planet, their first thought isn't to build corporate America, right? Their first thought would probably be like, okay, how can we survive? How can we allocate resources? How can we do that? It wouldn't be in how we set it up now. I think the employer-employee relationship is very unnatural. I think, in a sense, I think corporate America is a very unnatural setting. And I'm not going to lie to you, especially if you're just an employee with no ownership in what you're doing. If you have no ownership in the business of what you're doing, that's just, to me, like, that is just not natural. That's not normal. So, I mean, that's just my personal opinion. That's just not normal. I think we normalized it over time, but it's just not normal at all. So, and that's outside of the 401k, right? I'm not talking about retirement benefits and shit like that. I'm talking about actual ownership in a particular company, right? Where you put in your energy and effort and you have ownership in the company. So that's just what my thing is. I don't know. So, but one thing I can tell you though is that you gotta watch out for everything that society tells you may not necessarily be beneficial. Because there's always the other side of that people just don't see. And I'm not going to necessarily get into that, but that's just the reality. So, and I think that's all that I gotta say. I gotta do some things today and run some errands. But see you guys later. Bye.